continue this conversation about the Durban International Airport. We do understand that it was obviously moved to make way for the King Shaka International Airport, that we've come to utilize it. However, Durban International Airport, there's a story behind there, and the individual that has been chasing that story is from Mail and Guard in Sabelo, Skiti. Sabelo, we had to take a break in intermission, obviously, just to look at where the comrades were a little bit earlier on. But when we're talking about Durban International Airport in itself, you said there was a deal that was brokered with Transnet, and Transnet acquired for Durban International Airport. And then what happened? So Transnet acquires Durban International Airport for the purpose of making it a smaller airport with smaller flights, for example, like a Lanseria or like a Rand airport in itself. Then what went wrong?
No, okay, so I think maybe we just go back a little bit. So the reason Transnet acquires the land, it's very close to the port. I don't know if you're familiar with that old airport. So what Transnet wanted to do there is that they wanted to construct what you call a dugout airport, a dugout port, which would basically be like a much larger port that would be able to handle all manner of freight and that sort of thing. But now, because of the feasibility studies and all the process that needs to take place, this project will only get off, the ground. I think that the last, figures they were mentioning was like 2030 or 2032.
I think another one was saying that it was around 2027. It was supposed to be like a 10-year
yes.
From 2017 to 2027.
So I mean, even the figure of 2027 now, because of other processes, has been moved back, and because of the cost as well. So in the interim, then they get approached by a company that says, listen, in the meantime, you've got this asset, you've paid nearly 2 billion rand for it. We can help you generate some money from it by operating this airport. The initial lease was for 10 years. They were going to operate this airport. From my understanding is that they were also going to invest about 200 million rand into refurbishing the space and to getting it to, the standards that we enjoy now, your typical AXA airports. The only snag that was there, of course, is that when they got to the property and they were about, to take ownership over it, they found that, half that space has been occupied by illegal tenants.
How did that happen?
Well, I mean, this is, I think, the great mystery that Transnet will one day have to answer for us, is that in broad daylight, these companies are operating there. You've got a logistics company that has even had the audacity to put down a warehouse and a fuel depot. You've got these guys...
A logistics company that's had the audacity to put down a warehouse at the Durban International Airport.
Yes, on the property.
On the property, a warehouse, a logistics company. Okay, yes. Then warehouses don't just pop up.
Well, I mean, look...
So who gave the permission? Who granted the permission for a logistics company to put up this warehouse there? Who granted permission for these tenants? Who thought it was okay for me to enter to a door of a Durban International Airport and to put up my base and to set up base there, and there'll be no repercussions for it?
So... remember, when this property gets bought up by Transnet, then it becomes part of, their assets. All of their properties are contained in a subsidiary called Transnet Properties. So these guys have a lot of properties. I mean, if you think about the Carlton Centre, for instance, in the CBD of Johannesburg, Huma Rail in Port Elizabeth, they've got a number of properties in Durban as well, from which, they manage, and if they do lease out those properties, then they get some sort of, income and revenue from them. So you had your Transnet Property Division in KZN that, according to a number of forensic reports and investigations done into, how these people got onto the property, it seems as if they were striking deals with individual officials within that department. So these guys were entering into sort of negotiations with people, anyone could actually go there and say, listen, I want this piece of, this piece of the site. I want to maybe store containers, or I want this piece of the site. I want to operate a scrapyard, or I want to operate a logistics company. There's an entertainment company there which hosts anything from raves to conferences. There's guys that have converted part of the entrance to the terminal into like a small diner that sells food to everyone that's on that property.
What happened to the plan of refurbishing Durban International Airport and turning it into a lower cost airport that will be able to have and see more flights and even have the flight school? I'm hearing the entertainment. I'm just trying to understand what happened to the plan in itself.
Well, it seems as if the big snag for SeaWorld Aviation is the fact that you can't really do anything. You can't really invest and start refurbishing that property because you've got these illegal tenants that are there.
But they're not illegal.
Well, they are.
I mean, they're there. There's an entertainment. They got permission from someone, as you were saying,
Yes.
and they went into the echelons of Transnet and were busy trying to negotiate. And they did. They negotiated clearly successfully because they're there. They negotiated some land area and some entertainment area. If you've got even a diner that is operating from the runway, that clearly says that a lot of permission was granted. So who okayed it in Transnet? Who was receiving the money for actually acquiring those pieces of land? And furthermore to it, are those people going to be brought to book? Because what happens to the airport?
Well, I mean, this is the whole thing now. So Transnet, I think since about 2017, has been getting feedback in the form of forensic investigation and forensic reports. So what these forensic reports and investigations have revealed is that these contracts that were concluded with these tenants were not legal, were not legally done. So the people that signed off on them didn't have the delegation of authority.
Who are those?
Well, I mean, these are the officials. A lot of these officials have, subsequently resigned.
But are they named? Do you know the names? No, because ultimately it's about accountability. Who was the one that signed off? They may have resigned, but that person is sitting at home right now, comfortably so, while Durban International Airport is turned into a diner. So who is that person?
Well, I think one of the people that are fingered, in one of the reports is the former chief executive of Transnet Property, Mr. Sabelo. There's about 4 or 5 other employees within that division who have been fingered, but unfortunately, in the process of trying to, get to the story, we weren't able to reach out to them and talk to them. So it wouldn't be fair for me to mention their names.
Why?
But Transnet knows exactly.
Reach out and talk to them?
Yes, we did.
And when you tried to find them, what happened?
Well, I mean, some of them had moved on, so you couldn't get contact numbers. Other people, the numbers that you could get for them were numbers that they no longer were using. So some of the numbers are now off. The other numbers have been given to other Transnet employees. But I think the point here to not forget is that Transnet is aware. Transnet has been sitting on these forensic reports since 2017. They know exactly who was, who signed what illegal lease. They know what makes these leases illegal. They ought to have then begun a process by then to say, how do we then get out of these contracts? We can go to court and have these contracts declared unlawful and then evict these people. Well, Transnet says they've started a process. They're not telling us when the process was started. We certainly know that it wasn't in 2017. It might be a new process because one of the things that SeaWorld has done is that they've tried to actually take possession of that property and actually do the investments as required so that they can start operating this airport. They've been getting, a fair amount of resistance. I think the questions we ought to be asking is, why does it seem that it's not in Transnet's interest to actually evict these people that are illegal? And I mean, some of the business operations on this property, by the way, are not even zoned for by the city council, which means even if those contracts were legitimate, you could not possibly run a conference center at the airport because the airport is not zoned for that sort of thing. You couldn't possibly run a scrapyard there because it's not zoned to have a scrapyard operating in that area.
Sabelo, hopefully that this conversation that we're having is actually raising some alarm bells where on behalf of Transnet, and I think that also on behalf of those individuals that did make those signatures visible and were the ones that were behind it, because every single thing has got a paper trail, doesn't it? If you follow the paper trail, you get to follow where the money went. But we have to leave a conversation there. I do know that for a fact. I think this investigation, hopefully you continue with it, is going to bring some light into a lot of capture that has been happening, especially when it comes to our SOEs, which is quite disheartening. So thanks a lot for joining us on Newsnight this evening. Sabelo, Skiti there from the Mail and Guardian, really speaking to us about maybe should we say where the money went on behalf of Durban International Airport. However, still ahead on Newsnight this evening, a substation explosion leaves parts of Ekurhuleni in the dark for days. Details on that coming up next.